Karen demands VIP table, claiming to know the owner, but I'm the owner, and she was left crying with a $4,000 bill. After my revenge, Karen stormed into the restaurant, loudly claiming she knew the owner and demanding that we give her and her group of friends the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The problem was, I owned the restaurant and had no idea who this woman was. Still, I decided to play along and see what would happen. During dinner, one of the girls asked me if I thought my life was meaningless, because I worked as a waiter. That's when I realized all bets were off, and I was going to get my retribution. This happened around Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents immigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and started a restaurant. When they passed away, my parents took over, expanding and growing it over the decades. I have been working there since I was 15. As my parents got older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending winters in Florida. A few years ago, they sold the restaurant to me, keeping a small percentage of ownership as an additional source of income, alongside their savings. As soon as I took over, I modernized everything. I renovated the restaurant, updated the logo, and reached out to local and national newspapers for advertising. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. At first, business was slow, and I started to fear that the loan I had taken for all these changes was the worst mistake of my life, that I had ruined a 3-generation family business. But eventually, things turned around. A local semi-YouTuber featured us in a video, bringing in more customers and reviews. Even on Mondays, we started seeing 5 to 10 times the usual traffic. We became a popular destination for large events, and it wasn't uncommon for celebrities to stop by on certain nights. I even invited some high-profile guests to cook for our customers. It was expensive, but by the holidays, we were fully booked. People had to make reservations as early as July to get a table in December. Even with all the success, I didn't sit in the back office. When things got busy, I worked on the floor, greeting customers, clearing tables, even mopping if needed. On nights with special guests or events, I wore a jacket and took charge. One evening, 6 women walked in. 5 of them looked to be in their early 20s, while the leader appeared to be in her mid-20s. I assumed she was either an older sister or a senior in a sorority. As they approached, Queen Bee Karen was telling the others how amazing the restaurant was, how great the food was, and how there might even be celebrities inside. When she reached me, she said she needed a table for 6. I replied, "Of course. Can I get the name on the reservation?" She stared at me and said, "Oh, I didn't make one, but that's fine. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He always keeps a couple of tables open for special guests, and we'll take one of those tonight." That kind of arrangement does exist in high-end restaurants, and I had recently started doing it myself, but I had never seen or spoken to this woman. It was obvious she was trying to get in without a reservation, but she had picked the worst person to try it on. I said, "I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we're fully booked." I didn't want to outright say, "I'm the owner and we've never met," because I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the others. She then told one of the girls to take a picture of me and said she would contact the owner and make sure I was either scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The girls behind her joined in, saying things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I couldn't tell if they were playing along or actually believed her. Queen Bee Karen then said, "Look, you can either give us a table, or I can make your life very difficult. This isn't worth losing your job." She kept pointing, trying to intimidate me, to belittle me, saying things like, "Obviously, you're nobody here, because if you were, you'd know who I am, and would never tell me anything other than yes or of course." She kept trying to put me down while taking that table. At that point, it had already been a long day for me, and from my perspective, I had 3 options. First, I could tell her I was the owner and call her out on everything. Second, I could just give her the table and let it go. Or third, I could teach Queen Bee Karen and her minions a lesson. I chose option 3. I smiled and said, "Of course, Mom. Please follow me." I gave her one of the 3 tables we keep open in case a celebrity walks in, which does happen occasionally. I told her I apologized for everything, and that she was right. It was easier to just give her the table. I also told her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be complimentary. I seated them and personally served them. Once they were settled, I explained that we needed a credit card and IDs to keep on file, and that we would return them before they left. Queen Karen handed me her card and told the others, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, brought their complimentary drinks, and informed them that due to how busy we were, their meals might be delayed. They didn't seem to care. They were focused on the free drinks. They ordered 3 rounds and still hadn't received any food. Eventually, they called me over to check on it, all while giving me the same attitude they had since arriving. I said I'd look into it and asked if they wanted more drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds. By the time the appetizers arrived, they were already drunk, having spent most of the night drinking on empty stomachs and only eating salads. As more food came out, they kept ordering more drinks. What they didn't realize was that they were seated at our VIP table, which normally costs several $1,000s just to sit at, though I didn't charge them for that. Aside from the first 3 rounds, I charged them for every expensive cocktail they ordered throughout the night. Also, since it was a VIP table, the menus were different. Prices weren't listed, which is a common practice in the restaurant industry. The menu included high-end items like white truffle, black caviar meals, and specially imported West Coast oysters, among others. At one point I started to question what I was doing. I wondered if I was going too far with these girls. They might not have known any better, but certain things pushed me to continue, like when one of the girls asked if I thought my life was pointless, because I was just a server. Another staff member told me they had been talking about how they could mess with me anytime they wanted, and that I would always give them a table. I even overheard one of them say, "He's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter. He's such a pushover." There were more comments like that throughout the night, so I continued the lesson. By the end of the night, each of them had run up a bill between $500 and $600. I brought Queen Karen the total, $4,323 and $23.23, including tax and tip. I have never seen someone sober up so quickly. She went from laughing with her friends to nearly in tears. She immediately called me over and asked if it was some kind of joke. I took the bill, looked it over, and said, "I'm sorry, I'll get you the correct amount." She instantly relaxed, assuming she had been given someone else's bill, and called me an effing idiot before turning back to her friends. When I returned with the same bill, she exploded again. I calmly asked, "Is there something on this bill that you didn't order?" She and the others went silent, then started going through every line, including the first entries, showing their initial 3 rounds as complimentary. They pulled out their phones and checked everything repeatedly, adding it all up. Queen Bee looked visibly shaken. She simply said, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." Part of me worried she might try to dine and dash, leaving the others with the bill, but I subtly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card without making it obvious. 10 minutes later she returned with fresh makeup, clearly having cried. She started complaining about how bad the food was, how awful the drinks were, and demanded that I at least cut the bill in half. She added that the others would help pay, despite previously telling them the night was on her. Then, as if it suddenly came to her, she brought up her supposed connection to the owner again, thinking it would push me to reduce the bill. I smiled and said no. Simply no. Simply no. I couldn't change the bill. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages from a contact saved as my restaurant's name followed by owner. I immediately understood what she had likely been doing in the restroom, renaming one of her friend's contacts and deleting previous messages to create his story. I looked through the messages, checked the contact details, and told her that wasn't the owner's number. She replied that he had multiple business phones and that I obviously didn't know all of them. I said, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off, then I'll do it." Instead of agreeing, she started yelling and ranting, drawing the attention of the few remaining customers. At that point, I decided it was time to end it. I told her in a firmer tone, "Cut the act. You don't know the owner. You've never been here before. And if you keep this up, I'll call the police." Her tone shifted as she tried to defend herself, but her argument fell apart. I responded, "My grandfather started this restaurant. My family has run it for decades. I have worked here nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner, and I have never seen or heard of you. Nor have I made any promises to a stranger before tonight." The others stood frozen, unsure how to react, while she began to cry. I continued, "I gave you the table you demanded, one reserved for high-end clients, which I didn't charge you for, along with 3 rounds of free drinks. If you don't pay your bill, I will call the police and provide them with your identification." She signed the bill in tears, and the others pulled out what cash they had, probably a couple hundred, and handed it to her, promising to pay her back later. 2 days later, an angry man came into the restaurant and asked one of my bartenders to speak with me. I was in the back office, so he had to wait about half an hour. She was with him, keeping her head down. I brought them both into my office and showed him clips from the security cameras, which had high-quality audio. Since they were in the VIP section, we keep detailed records there due to past unrelated incidents. I showed him most of it. Their comments, their orders, everything. When it was over, he stormed out with her, yelling at her the entire way. I haven't seen or heard from any of them since. The original bill I gave them, without the $120 oysters, is now framed on my desk. As a side note, I didn't lose as much money on the table or the 3 free rounds as it might seem. The table was meant to remain empty anyway, so I didn't lose anything. I hadn't expected to gain anything from it in the first place. The cost of the meal and the additional drinks more than made up for the cost of the first 3 rounds, so now that you know everything. Am I the jerk? Perhaps the most shocking part about the Karens in this situation, aside from the money, trying to force their way into getting a table and avoiding paying the bill, was their perspective on the world. That one comment about the OP being inadequate as a waiter really stood out. It seemed like he was ready to ease up on his entire plan for revenge. But then one of the girls asked if he felt his life was meaningless, because all he had become was a waiter. That has to be one of the most unbelievably entitled viewpoints we've seen on this channel. It may not be as dramatic or wild as some other stories, but the fact that she genuinely sees the world that way is disturbing. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of income. This kind of attitude often shows up toward jobs like janitors. And it's something I strongly dislike. When people think they're better than others, just because they don't work those roles. There is nothing wrong with being a janitor. I don't understand that mindset. But in this case, she not only believed that, she openly mocked him for doing a difficult job like being a waiter. Or at least what she assumed he was. One more thing. I'm glad the story ended on a somewhat satisfying note, with the father trying to address the situation but ultimately becoming more upset with his daughter than with the restaurant owner. The only part that bothered me was that the restaurant was recording audio of the people at the table. I'd probably avoid going somewhere if I knew my conversations were being recorded. Overall, I'm glad things worked out for the OP. But tell me, how would you have handled the situation if it were your restaurant, and these were your customers? Was the OP a jerk or not, and why? Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And hit the notification bell to stay updated on more shocking real-life stories happening around you.